Good day. On December 25th, 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. And in the ashes of the Soviet Union, several countries were formed. But one of them, the Russian Federation, elected Boris Yeltsin as their first independent president. Boris Yeltsin assumed the role of president of Russia on December 31st, 1991. He served until December of 1999. His 8-year tenure was very painful for Russia. It was at a point Russia was very weak. And apart from the country being weak in a post Soviet era, the leadership also was considered to be weak because Boris Yeltsin, it so turned out, had a lot of health challenges. But beyond that also, they chronicled the fact that he tended to like to have a drink or a little bit more than one maybe. But they had accusations of alcoholism. But in that period also, in trying to implement an economic boost, because they were now leaning towards the West and the policies that Western liberal thinkers like Jeffrey Sachs were putting on to the Russians, they experimented with sale of public private privatization of Russian assets. Those assets were quickly snapped up by a few people who became known as oligarchs. If you follow football in England, the Premier League, you will know of one of such oligarchs. His name is Abramovich. He bought Chelsea Football Club. But it was just not him. A lot of them bought oil wells, mines, and a lot of the lucrative industries that Russia had from or inherited from the Soviet Union. There were a few people who controlled a very large, vast amount of the wealth of Russia. But that period was also a period of immense economic pain for Russians. It was Russia was very poor. But if Russia was poor economically, they were even poorer politically. And it was because Russia was not such a strong country that in the intervening years, not too long after the collapse of the Soviet Union, just about a decade, NATO started to expand. The first wave of expansion, I think, took place in 2004, and there was a continuous wave of expansion. So here's the thing, between 1999 and 2004, there was a long period. But just before Yeltsin died, he did something for Russia and for himself. First, he appointed one close confidant as prime minister. And when he died, that prime minister took over and ultimately became president. And that prime minister then was Vladimir Putin. Putin has had a big imprint in the history of modern day Russia since 1999. First as prime minister, later on he ran for presidency, did 2 terms, and resigned according to the constitution, and took over again. And he has run Russia since then. They had to amend the constitution to accommodate his various terms. But one thing is certain, the Russia that Putin inherited is definitely not the Russia that has moved and bulldozed this way into being one of the strong poles of the multipolar world. In the reckoning of many geopolitical analysts, I think they say Russia is number 3. Because considering the big economic might of China, they concede that China may just be number 2. But however you read it and however you cut it, Russia is in the mix. And it is this projection of power, strength, and sovereignty that formed the theme of Putin's discussion today at the Valdai Discussion Club, where in Sochi, where he had a long presentation for over 4 hours. Putin has been the main topic of the news in many news platforms today, and he had a lot to say, especially regarding the multipolar world, the war in Ukraine, the relationship with Europe, and the changing face of geopolitics in the world. Good day and welcome to my channel, Ebimo Amungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe. If you have any comments regarding the views I express in this video, please put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. President Putin today attended a session of the annual Valdai Discussion Club in Sochi. It was one where he had a vast array of topics to talk about. He first of all made a big presentation. Then after the presentation, he now sat in a panel. And then after the panel discussions, he now took questions. This has been an annual thing. It's not new. It's one that a lot of people look forward to. And it is one where he tells the world the present condition of things, and what he ended up telling the world, and from what many people got, is that Russia is very confident, self-aware, very sovereign state, and Russia is strong and mighty, and Russia can stand any aggression brought towards it. The theme of this year's discussion, from the Russian point of view, is that we are a strong country, we are a sovereign country, and we have such military might that anybody who brings aggression to us, you bring it on, or we'll give it back to you in equal measure. So President Putin did talk a lot about a number of things. And he said the most important thing is that he said that Russia can't afford to be weak. History has shown that being strong is the best security guarantee against foreign aggressors. The Russian president insists that Russia just has to be a strong country. Being weak is no option for Russia, as it is. History has demonstrated. President said that during his, he said that Russia will never display weakness and indecisiveness. No, Russia will never be seen to be indecisive. There will be no indecision regarding the ability to respond to aggression. Those who are harboring dreams of inflicting this very strategic defeat on Russia should take heed of this message. Something happened when all the shenanigans in Ukraine started to boil over. The very first time that Russia asserted itself, Putin had a clear and present issue, first of all, to deal with. There was problems in the South Caucasus, and he had to deal with it decisively. The first Chechen war and the second Chechen war, it was very brutal. He came hard on them, and that was his first show of his strength, or Russian strength. He resolved that matter, and Kadyrov is now the governor there. And a few days ago, they were celebrating the transformation of Chechnya and Grozny into one of Russia's most modern cities. That's the kind of assertion he put. But even then, when in the Munich Security Council meeting in uh, in 2007, when the continuous encroachment of NATO towards the east of Europe, getting closer to the borders of Russia, Putin complained that one person's security should not be at the expense of another person's security. The indivisibility of security should be considered. But at that time, there was only one global hegemon, and that global hegemon was America. And they scoffed and snuffed at Russia. And what their response was that from that moment onwards, they came out with deliberate plans and stratagems of how to, 1, eliminate Putin, 2, and defeat Russia. That strategy fell very well and neatly into the aspirations, the nationalist aspirations of some Ukrainians. It was a long one in coming, but there were some countries that tried to get close to the West that were bordering Russia, and there was decisive action taken against them. One of them was Georgia. Georgia lost some provinces, just as how Ukraine has lost some provinces. And another also was Moldova. They are just too close to Russia to be harboring Western missiles that may be pointed at Russia. That's the way Putin sees it, and he had to intervene. But it was this intervention in 2014 when there was a coup in Ukraine that removed a Russian-friendly president and placed some people that were more amenable to the interest of the West, that Russia took a very decisive action that nobody even foresaw. They overran Crimea and took it. For several years, Crimea had been the access to the Black Sea. And for several years, that access to the Black Sea has been one that bothered quite a lot of countries that were bothered about the strength and the might of the Russian Empire and wanted to contain them and quarantine them within the Black Sea so they will not go out and be disturbing their empires in other places, particularly the British and the French. They did everything they could to keep. But the Russian fleet in Sebastopol had always been there. It had always been there. And that decisive action by Putin to quickly take Crimea, organize a referendum, and incorporate Crimea into the Russian state was one that kept the whole world, the whole Western world reeling. They didn't see it coming. The movement of Crimea into the Russian state was swift, decisive. And that's the decisiveness that he has shown. As this war in Ukraine is going on, people may say that Russia is not as decisive because they could do much more. But definitely, they also have their own strategic intent and their strategic goals as they are going. Putin has warned and cautioned potential adversaries against provoking Russia, adding that it has always ended up badly for instigators, without exception. Recent and far history does seem to support him. Yesterday, I talked about how Napoleon marshaled 600,000 soldiers to go and defeat the Russian state. Then under Alexander I, Napoleon went back a broken man. The same thing too happened to Hitler. He, in his own case, he rallied all the countries around them, Finland, Hungary, and quite a number of countries that had borne the brunt of the Russian Empire. His army then was 3 million. Operation Barbarossa, it was called. Hitler did inflict a lot of damage, especially on the human capital of Russia. But ultimately, the German army was gutted out and destroyed from the east. And with the little pressure that the Americans put on it, it just collapsed. Hitler committed suicide. That's the story. Whether we believe it or we don't believe it, that's a story that is the history supports. So this is what Putin had to say in this forum. It was quite a lot, he said, but let me just share this one video of where he had this to say.
Спите спокойно, займитесь, наконец, своими проблемами. Посмотрите, что происходит на улицах европейских городов, что творится с экономикой, промышленностью, с европейской культурой и идентичностью, с огромными долгами и нарастающим кризисом систем социального обеспечения, вышедшей из-под контроля миграции, ростом насилия, в том числе политического, радикализации лева...
Well, I mean, so I just stop it there because I'm sure many of us here don't understand Russian, even though there's subtitles. But ultimately, what he was saying is that all those who have rejected Russia's gas, all those people who have come and massed up against Russia in various rounds of sanction, he called them quite foolish. He says it's very idiotic, and it says the rejection of Russian gas in Europe has led to the closure of fertilizer factories, accelerated inflation, and people are taking to the streets. Indeed, we do see a lot of people demonstrating all across Europe now. The European Union's economy has been in stagnation for some time. This is also contrary to the fact now that the Russian economy is growing. And Putin said for the West, Ukraine, unexpendable. This is where he showed a little form of humanity. He says the Ukrainians are their brothers. It's quite a sad thing that some people took a long investment in wheedling and brainwashing and radicalizing the Ukrainians to the extent that ultimately they did that coup in 2014 that led to the tragedy that he did call it a tragedy. He was so sympathetic to the war there that the humanity in Putin was out there for all to see. It's just that some critics on social media says if he was so human, how come they're bombing the jibas out of the Ukrainians now, especially now that they are now changed the strategy to one where they are attacking power plants and train stations and electricity substations and all that. But ultimately, he did show that he complained that the Ukrainians are being used as a cannon fodder and that just like how the Americans used South Vietnam, it's just the same way that the Ukrainians are being used. There's something going on now, and this was one that was a cause of concern for some questionnaires, and that has to do with the nuclear bombing of the Zaporozhye nuclear plant. The Russian president stated very clearly that Ukraine should remember that they too also have a nuclear plant in Chernobyl. They do have. Ukraine has about 4 nuclear plants, and all the special military operation has spared them. But Ukraine has made repeated attempts to bomb the Zaporozhye nuclear plant that is under the control of the Russians, and also the Kursk plant. Ukraine did in fact move into Kursk, and some people believe clearly that, I think Gerasimov even said it, that the objective of that movement into Kursk, incursion into Kursk, was mainly to capture the Kursk nuclear power plant. So he warned that Russia can mirror any action, especially as attacks on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant has actually taken out electricity supply to the plant. But he assured that no harm is going to come to that plant in Zaporizhzhia, that it is under it is being protected. Let me just say that. And while he is saying this and planning all this and talking about all this in Valdai, this obviously was one that a lot of people wanted to listen to today. There was a meeting in European Union, in Denmark, where the European Union, 50 people from the European Union, 50 supporters of Ukraine gathered to continue to assure that they will continue to support Ukraine in the light of the drone attacks, unexplained drone attacks all across Europe. They have come into urgent action. The actions and the complete and total commitment of the Europeans to this project now has heightened, especially as America has more or less stepped back. Under the Biden years, the front leader in every decision was the Biden administration. We always saw Anthony Blinken then, and we also saw Lloyd Austin. Those were the main faces then that we always saw regarding decisions taken about Ukraine and what's going on in Europe now. But now Americans have slowly walked away from this project. And so who do we see all the time now? I think most of you will be very familiar with this face.
Today, we are disbursing 4 billion euros for Ukraine. 2 billion euros of that will be invested in drones. And we have to increase the pressure on Russia. And this is why I have proposed reparation loans for Ukraine on the basis of the immobilized Russian assets. We are not confiscating the assets, but we are taking the cash balances for loan to Ukraine Ukraine has to pay back this loan if Russia pays reparations. Because
That will be the day. The way I know my little understanding of warfare is that the countries that win don't usually pay the reparation. And at this time, even though she may not be aware of it, the Russians have won. The ability to impose your will on a country by some groups of country or a coalition of countries, whatever, it's been what geopolitics has always been. We saw what happened to the Qing dynasty when they were very weak and they fell way behind in technology. And the whole world came and had their own little bit and bite of China. Um, the British imposed opium on them. Say you must smoke it, you must take opium. So they imposed opium on them in the Opium Wars. And when they had a little disagreement with the British and the Europeans during the Boxer Revolution in 1900, just early 90s or sometime just before then, a coalition of 8 European countries were very swift and decisive in dealing with the Chinese. The Chinese never forget it. They call it the 100 years of humiliation. They lost their sovereignty. Ukraine now is in that position where every single decision is taken for her, and every single decision is now being proposed by Ursula von der Leyen and the commission she leads, the European Union Commission. But on that same theme of China, we see a situation where today it emerged that China, now the second pole in the multipolar world, now the one that has come out strong after so many years of humiliation, but now a country that has moved 800 million people out of poverty, the country that leads in almost all the indices of innovation in the world now, the country that produces by far the most amount of electricity in the world, the one that produces arms that some people don't even know what they are, 6th-generation planes. That country has used something as very small, little food stuff that they don't particularly eat more. They do eat it. They may use it very extensively in their diet. But to a large extent, they use it for their husbanding their pigs and feeding their pigs, and that's soybeans. Today, a tweet came out of President Donald Trump. This is the tweet here. He calls it truth because he usually puts it on his truth social. But this is what it said ultimately. He said the soybean farmers of our country are being hurt because China is, for negotiating reasons only, not buying. We've made so much money on tariffs that we are going to take a small portion of that money and help our farmers. I will never let the farmers down. Sleepy Joe Biden didn't enforce our agreement with China where they were going to purchase billions of dollars of our farm product. The soybeans in particular, it's all going to work out very well. I love our patriots, and every farmer is exactly that. I'll be meeting President Xi of China in 4 weeks, and the soybeans will be a major subject, a topic for the discussion. Um, it's very interesting that soybeans will be a very major topic of discussion between President Trump and President Xi Jinping. It's amazing that something as little as soybeans, we saw how the Chinese projected power, but they did it with something that is very scientific, arcane, very unique, and that's rare earth metals. They control the whole supply chain of it. And they used it in leveraging during the negotiations, the trade war negotiations. But soybeans, it so turns out that the Chinese used to buy soybeans a lot in large shiploads from America. Last year, the trade was $12.5 billion. But this year, the Chinese have just stopped buying. As at last count, they bought only 0 0.000% of their soybeans. They use these soybeans extensively in agriculture, but they also use it in making tofu. It's a very important part of their meal. But guess what now? They found other places from which they have new friends, as we know. They are the leaders and the promoters of the big BRICS project. And in that BRICS, they're Brazil. They're the one who gave the word B. Brazil is now the biggest supplier of soybeans. Almost all the needs of China is supplied by the Brazilians. The other day, it even emerged. There was a little window in Argentina. Argentina reduced export tax, and swiftly the Chinese bought huge volumes of soybeans from Argentina, but none from America. This is not how it's supposed to play. America is supposed to be the big, powerful America, and you will have to buy their soybeans. After all, they want India to buy their oil. They want countries that they just forced Ursula von der Leyen to buy American oil. $750 billion worth of American oil, $250 billion for each year for 3 years. You must buy American planes, you must buy American. But they can't get the Chinese to buy American soybeans. The Chinese used to be weak. They're no more weak. But it is not that you can't get them to buy the soybeans. You can't even get them to sell your products anymore. We know that America has shown strength with our ability to stifle access of semiconductors to the Chinese. It so turns out the Chinese are so strong now in innovation that they are even doing their own semiconductors. They have strengthened their semiconductor industry. And the other day I just got that they are testing new DUV machinery, and they will soon definitely be producing their own EUV lithographic machines that will give them access and ability to make cutting-edge semiconductors, maybe of 3 nanometer inkling. The Chinese are not being pushed around again the way they used to be. They are now strong. This is the thinking, though, of some political thinkers, most notably John Meishelman, who continues to assert that power politics needs you to be strong. If not, you will be overwhelmed. He's a realist. He always says that. And he always is worried that America should assert itself over China. It seems like that ability is slipping away progressively and slowly. Another country, too, that has threatened its posturing these days because it doesn't want to be seen to be weak anymore is Iran. Iran, something very important happened today. The strategic partnership, comprehensive strategic partnership between Iran, signed between Iran and Russia, came into effect today. Comprehensive strategic partnership between Russia and Iran officially entered into force on October 2nd, 2025. The 20-year agreement was originally signed by the Russian President Vladimir Putin and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on January 17, 2025. Some of the details is that they must expand their cooperation, mainly in defense, in energy, in finance. We already see that they've expanded the amount of trade between themselves, and recently they just signed a new contract to build 8 more new nuclear reactors. They also want to do the same thing that the CSO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization does. I think um, uh, uh, Iran is now a member of BRICS. I can't remember if they're a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but it's about countering terrorism. We saw what happened in the 12-day war, where quite a lot of people were able to help the Israelis. Mutual defense clause: if one of the parties faces aggression, the other is obligated not to assist the aggressor. This particular clause is the one where the Russians said, rather than the one that they have with the North Koreans, where if one has any conflict, the other was obligated to come and help. in this particular case, the Iranians were very circumspect about this particular clause, and this is what became acceptable to them. If one of the parties faces aggression, the other is obligated not to assist the aggressor. Security, I think I have a footage here of when they were signing this, and maybe I should show this on the background. Yes, I have a footage of when this document was being signed. And so economic collaboration provisions include working together on economic projects, creating payment infrastructure. We know that they have already sanctioned Iran. Iran is out of the SWIFT, but these two countries have already been trading between each other. Russia sells a lot of gas, I think over 40 billion cubics to the Iranians, and payment will be obviously through the infrastructure, through national currencies. And the ratification process was done in April in the Russian parliament, and in Iran in May, just before the 12-day war. This particular agreement is supposed to last for 20 years. So the geopolitical machinery is moving. Sovereignty. Sovereignty is what is people are fighting for. That ability to have their way. One other country too that is fighting for its sovereignty, we'll call them hapless, because it's almost like they are fighting with machine guns and small arms, and their opponent is fighting with F-35s, nuclear weapons, and they also have the whole American military behind them, and that's Hamas. Hamas in Gaza today rejected President Trump's peace plan. And one of the big things is that they are fighting for their sovereignty, their self-determination. That's how they see it. But for the Israelis, Hamas is a terrorist organization. Anyway, today, big problems came up for the Israelis. They stopped the Sumud Global Flotilla that was going on to Gaza, and rounded up all the activists, almost 400 of them. Among them is Greta Thunberg, and Greta Thunberg has been very good. The Israelis, despite their power, are having some serious PR challenges. It has been a disaster, especially having stopped the Sumud Flotilla activists, rounded them up. Today they were being harangued and harassed by Ben-Gvir, the internal security chief of Israel. He called them terrorists. He called them all sorts of names. I do have that footage, but I'll let it slide. And they've already initiated deportation processes. They are filing legal cases against them. And we know that among them, Greta Thunberg, former Barcelona mayor Ada Colau, European Parliament member Rima Hassan, Nelson Mandela's grandson Nkosi Mandela. It is bringing such spotlight, and there's been demonstrations, huge crowds all over Europe, demanding that they are both freed and that there should be some form of two-state solution and freedom for Palestine. This is just not what the Israelis. It's a nightmare. Not to talk about the intense pressure the MAGA base of President Donald Trump are putting on the Israeli lobby, the state of Israel. This morning I did in my video, I showed how Tucker Carlson was interviewing Jeffrey Sachs, and how they were talking about the access and the impunity with which the Israeli military officers get into Pentagon and command American officers practically in that place. It was to the chagrin of Tucker Carlson to learn of all this, and then he also learned that Netanyahu goes about telling everybody in the whole of the Middle East that President Donald Trump is in his pocket. In fact, quite a lot of people believe that the Middle Eastern policy of America is written in Tel Aviv and not in Washington, D.C. That is the reality. But even then, with all this power and with all this might, the Palestinians still assert that they must have their sovereignty and they must have self-determination. It is doing a lot of damage. Israel has never seen itself and found itself in this space for a long time. Accusations of genocide, accusations of all sorts of accusations are coming at them by all the institutions. Many, many, many powerful institutions. The ICC, the ICJ, the other day I reeled out all the humanitarian bodies that have accused Israel of various wrongdoings. This is a period of propaganda nightmare. They lost the narrative, and it is to that extent why Netanyahu said that it is very imperative that they seize control of the narrative again by buying TikTok. Already, we know that the biggest supporter of the IDF, Larry Ellison, his son just bought CNN, CBS, Warner Brothers, and they are very much in the mix to buy TikTok so that they can get back the narrative that Israel has lost. Anyway, this is where I end my video for today. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. If you have any comments regarding the opinions I just expressed, please put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share and promote this video and promote this channel so that we'll continue to tell the truths we're already telling in this channel. Thank you for your support and thank you for being with me to this point. Until I see you in my next video, goodbye.